This podcast is brought to you by the Tampa Bay Podcast Network. Well, hello, my lovely drumsters. It's Dawn Marie, your host this evening on the Lil Drummer Girl. Today, we have Ken Mary, who was on the Tampa Jam Virtual Summit a while back. So this is part of the series. I want you to hear from him because he had so much great information about how he learned more than drumming. He was also a producer, an engineer, and he created his own studio. So for any of you who may be interested in dabbling in a couple of other things, you got to check out Ken's story here. All right, here we go. I'm so excited to have with us today Ken Mary. He's a drummer who's worked with Alice Cooper, John Waite, and now with Flotsam and Jetsam. He has worked on over 35 albums worldwide with sales of over $5 million. He has gone and done more than drumming. He's moved into songwriting and producing and engineering. You name it. He's worked on it. So we have a lot to cover with him today. Let's get him with us right now. Ken, thank you so much for being with us here today. I'm so excited because the last time we spoke was when I first started my podcast. And I know you have so many things going on since then. So I just want to catch up and see what's going on. But
thank you.
The last time I caught up with you, you were on tour with Flotsam and Jetsam. How long have you been with them?
I think about 2.5 years now.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
And I did the last record called The End of Chaos, and we're completing a new album called Brace for Impact, and that's going to be coming out on AFM Records. We were actually supposed to be on tour all through May and June and the summer doing festivals in Europe and I think some fall shows. And
you always have your hands on a lot of cookie jars. So you not only are a drummer, you produce, you do engineering work. You've worked with some of the top producers and engineers, that have worked with people like Janet Jackson. And my question is, when you were in the studio working with him, were they open to sharing their secrets with you, or were they kind of like, you can't watch me do this? Were they open to sharing, and so that you could learn how to do more of the business that you do in the studio?
Sure, that's a great question. And I was very blessed to work with some amazing producers, guys like Andy Johns, who engineered all the Led Zeppelin albums and worked on some of the huge Van Halen albums. Guys like Michael Wagner, who worked on Metallica, Megadeth. Janet Jackson was one of the ones you mentioned. He worked with on one of her records. A guy named Mac, who worked with Queen. He did a lot of the Queen, major Queen records. So I really had an opportunity to work with some incredible teachers, I would say. And the ones that I worked with, I had great experiences with, and they were very open to sharing what they knew. And, for instance, Michael Wagner is a friend of mine, and he was mixing down Ozzy Osbourne, No More Tears. And I would go and hang out with him, and, we'd go have lunch and then come back and mix down some classic songs that, today you hear on the radio. They're classics that have stood the test of time. And it was really cool to be in the mix down for those kinds of things, and seeing what Michael did and seeing what kind of processing and seeing what kind of effects and how he worked the process of mixing. And so, yeah, he's one of the engineers I would say I learned probably the most from, just as I spent the most time with him. But, I definitely learned from everybody and some very, I would say, useful information for sure. If you pay attention and you're working with people that are talented, you're going to learn a tremendous amount. So that's the one thing I would always tell younger musicians is, if you have the opportunity to work with somebody that's sold millions and millions of records, even guys like Desmond Child, he's written, huge hit songs for Aerosmith, Bon Jovi, and everybody under the sun. And I did one record with him, and he was in the studio, and I was doing drums on this particular album, and there were all these changes going on, and he was making all these changes that seemed to me like on the fly. He's like, okay, well, put a build here. Okay, put a break here. Do this, do that. And I was thinking to myself, wow, this guy really wrecked the song. And by the time it was done and I heard the final album, I was like, wow, this is brilliant, because he knew what was in his head, and he knew what he wanted to hear. And, but of course, you learn that, okay, sometimes these changes and these things that seem disruptive or whatever really are something that creates some magic in the material. So Yeah, you learn a lot from writers and producers and even musicians. You can learn a tremendous amount if you're open to being taught and you're paying attention.
And that right there is key, is that what you just said is to be open to learning, because I think as artists, we can always think, we're always right and we're never wrong. And so being open to learning is really important. And that's something that I've myself have been doing for years, because I feel like, there's so much to learn. I'm always open to learning something new. And as a friend of mine used to say, every day's a school day. So, I feel like everything you learn can take you on another step closer to your goals, to your dreams, and those amazing things that can happen in your life that you sometimes don't expect. You mentioned you have a couple new projects that are going on with an animated movie. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. One of the businesses that I have is a recording studio, and it's, if anybody wants to check out what type of studio, it's a full SSL real mixing console facility that I've had. I've had Sonic Fish Productions since 1990, I think 6 as an official company, but we really moved into like a commercial facility around 2003. And so for 17 years, we've had a very successful commercial entity. And so right now we've had to make a move more from audio products. We used to do probably 80 or 90% of our work would be albums and songs. And now we've moved a lot into movies and television and doing even things like Foley work, which is in an animated film, for instance. Every sound that's in that film has to be created, whether it's a door opening or birds in the background, or somebody picking something up, picking an item up, or whatever. You have to put in the sound effects for everything that happens. Wow. And it's a very time-consuming process. And then you also have to do things like really attempt to move the lip sync in time with the animation, because a lot of times the animators will do the animation to the lip sync, but it's not exactly locked up. So once they're done with their animation, you'll go back in and you might move some of the words around or change the timing, like time compress or expand them a little bit. And so you have that. And then you have the actual music, which we've been scoring and mixing. And then you have the mixing of the entire project. And then you have the mixing of the project, not only in stereo, but then you have to mix it in 5.1, which is a whole nother format where you have multiple sounds coming out of multiple speakers. And that's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it, but it's also another skill that you have to learn. And so, it's a very intense process, and it's a very involved process, but we're having a great time. And we're working on a film right now called Two Pennies. We've been working on that film for a few years now, and the animation is all being done in China. So just because of the cost of animation is so expensive, and they're able to do it a little bit less expensively. So that's one of the major projects we have going on. And there's some other things like you mentioned as well.
So, for instance, this movie, how long in length would you say is the actual movie, and how long has it been to actually, from start to finish, how long has it been to produce?
Well, we've been involved from the very beginning, and the process for this movie, because it's not a large budget movie. It's not a movie. If you look at some of the films that are animated, like let's take Frozen, for instance, and then you take Frozen 2. You look at the budgets for that, you're talking 80 million, $150 million. And if you look at the credits at the end of the movie, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people involved. And so they're able to do a huge movie like that in about a year and a half. We've been working on this realistically, I'd say, for about 4 years, but our team is so much smaller. And then the process is so intense. And we've been involved from there's a stage called animatics, and that's where an artist with pencil drawings actually makes a animated. The movie is broken down into sequences, and each sequence might be a minute to 3 minutes long, sometimes a little bit longer, sometimes a little bit shorter. But each shot and each scene has to be laid out in actual artwork, and also. Then they will do something called an animatic, which is where you fill in the blanks in the artwork and you make a motion picture that's about 5 frames per second, maybe 3 to 5 frames per second of rough animation. And that's how the actual 3D animation artists will base their animation, by looking at the animatics. It's all time coded to the 100th of a second, and they'll go through and they'll model things like the facial expressions and the movements, and the music will already be put in. Some of the music will be scratched, but all that's in, all the rough dialogue is in. So they're able to take that animatic and actually create animation from it. So that process for us, it's been about a 4-year process, but we're getting very close to the end now.
It's amazing how it's taken, 4 years, but it sounds so tedious and so many moving parts that I can't even begin to think of how you guys are doing that. Where will it be shown?
Well, we don't know yet. There's a couple distributors that are being looked at, and we don't know if it's going to be theatrical or just, Netflix and Amazon and all those. So we're not totally sure yet. It's going to be dependent on what size distributor we're able to actually get involved in the film.
Nice. I can't wait. Please let me know when it's ready to go out there. I'd love to share that with our audience. Awesome. Can you tell our jammers here how you actually got involved in creating your own space like that? Was it just out of a need for your own recording that you decided to open up a studio, or was it just something that you always wanted to do and you finally found like you had the time and the finances to do it and make it happen?
Well, it's a great question. And funny, in life, a lot of times, I like that. There's an old Green Day song that says, I can't remember what's the name of the song, but there's a line in it that says, life grabs you by the hand and tells you where to go. And I feel like the whole studio situation for me was kind of like that. I mean, when I was touring with Alice Cooper, I started buying, back in that day, this is the late 80s, and I bought a programmable keyboard and I bought a 4-track recorder so that I could write songs on the road. Because when you're on the road, it's it takes up 24 hours a day. And at the end of the day, you've done this tour, but if you haven't written any songs, if you haven't produced anything, then you've really wasted your time, kind of, in a sense, because you played that show for an hour and a half each day. But, the other 22 and a half hours, has been kind of a waste. So I bought a programmable keyboard and a 4-track, and I started writing songs. And then that kind of grew into when I was in House of Lords in the early 90s. We had a thing called an Akai 12-track, which was a 12-track recorder. And this is what the start of where you're really being able to record something that's fairly high quality in your own environment. Nice. As a matter of fact, one of our hit songs called Can't Find My Way Home, which went to number 6 in Billboard, was actually the recording that we did on our Akai 12-track. Wow. And we couldn't duplicate it in the major studio, so we took the 12-track, we bounced it to a 32-track digital, we redid the drums and bass, and that's where I first started learning, like, wow, you don't need to spend, $2,000 a day on a studio to actually get great product. So that sort of grew into me buying my own 12-track, and then ADATs came out, and then Pro Tools came out, and I've been working with Pro Tools since it was 8 tracks. Wow. And now you have, basically infinite tracks. But I remember when it was 8 tracks, and you could put on a 1-band EQ on each, on 2 of the channels. And we thought, wow, this is incredible. And we could do things like edit vocals. We could take pieces of one vocal track and edit it into a piece of another. And we thought that was, at the time it was like witchcraft, we were like, what is this strange, thing that we're working with? This is incredible. And then that grew into Pro Tools and an SSL. And I think what happened is I started producing my own albums and had some success doing that. And little by little, I think the first 2 albums I produced ended up getting picked up by record companies. Mm-hmm. And so it was one of those things where it's like, okay, you're a producer. And, life grabbed me by the hand and said, okay, this is what you're doing. And then the studio turned into this, I would say, honestly, it turned into kind of a wildly successful entity. But I think it was the right thing at the right time. I'm not sure you can really duplicate that kind of thing today. A lot of people come down to the studio. Occasionally we'll have a class from different colleges, like Mesa Community College usually comes down once a quarter, and I'll tell them about the studio and the equipment we have and how it was built and how we turned it into this, kind of a, I would say it's a small business, but at the same time in music production, it's one of the bigger music production facilities, and how we did that. And I always tell them, well, this was based on yesteryear's industry. That's not based on today's industry. This is based on the industry that was around in the late 90s and the 2000s. And so you have to think different now. Like nowadays, you can't really have this huge SSL console and all these different things because there's really not the business to support it. You have to think a little bit smaller, and a lot of people are doing things now where it's all in the box and looks more like my home studio. Like I'll show you real quick. Like this is my home studio.
Oh, that's awesome.
You can kind of see, I don't know what I'm showing you exactly.
Oh, but, I see everything. That's awesome.
There's just a little mic preamp and, a little Pro Tools interface, a laptop, a little keyboard. This is the movie I was actually talking about. These are the sound effects and things we're laying out. So, this is basically my home studio. And that's what most people's actual studios look like nowadays. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can do some tremendous work in your own little workspace. And, for what I'm doing here, like for the Flotsam album, there's certain things I have to do at the main Sonic Fish Productions, like drums. You have to have a good sounding drum room. You have to have good sounding drum mics. You have to, have great preamps and a great A to D converter system. But if you have that, you can do a lot of other things. Like I'll do a lot of the orchestration, a lot of keyboard programming, background vocals. I'll do a lot of different things at my home studio and not actually have to go down to the big facility.
I love that because, you can save a lot of time and money if you can do something at home.
And that's the other thing too, is the tools that we have nowadays compared to what we had in the, in the 90s or the 2000s. I mean, you've got drum programming things like Superior Drummer, that sound, if it's a simple drum part, it sounds like a real drummer. If it's too complex of a drum part, it starts sounding a little phony. But for the most part, if you're doing country songs or you're doing simple pop songs or whatever, I mean, there's so many options now of creating great music. I mean, especially if you're doing EDM stuff, you can create some great albums on a laptop. There's so many good programs. And I know some mixers in Nashville that they've gone completely what's called in the box, and they're, Grammy award-winning mixers, and they're mixing everything down on a laptop.
Right.
So, and
amazing.
It sounds great. So, what are you going to say?
It's true. I mean, even just being able to do my own podcast these days in my home without having to go into a studio to record anything. I mean, I get blown away by that every day, down and stuff like that. And all the money that, even there they saved a lot of money by, but still, I mean, the thing that you can have it in your house at your fingertips, and you can actually buy things pretty affordably these days. I mean, I was looking at some different programs, and I was shocked that, I was like, oh, wow, it's not what I thought it would be. I thought they were going to be like thousands of dollars, and they were just a few $100s. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty impressive because, whether you're a guitarist, a drummer, a singer, or like you say, a producer, an engineer, you can find so many different tools out there that you can use at home and not spend a fortune and just tinker around. You never know what you're going to come up with when you do that. It's pretty amazing.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Time is almost coming to a close here. Do you do any live stream with Flotsam and Jetsam right now? Anything online that you guys are doing?
Well, we talked about it, and we there's one of our friends who's running a fairly large. I'm trying to remember I don't remember exactly the name of it, but it's basically they're starting like a streaming service. I think it's going to actually I think it's called Streaming for Vengeance, which is pretty funny. They asked us to do like a 5-song live performance. The challenge is you have to find a place that can do that, with the cameras and the mics and being able to record it properly. And so we're very much wanting to do it. I don't know, we'll see if that's going to be something that, we have the ability to put together. It just really depends on if we can find somewhere that can do that and make it look professional and sound professional. So,
Right.
Certainly that's always important as well.
So how can our jammers stay in touch and, see what's going on with you? And are you on social media? So what are your
I
handles?
am. They could certainly look me up. I'm Ken Mary, I think 1 or something, because apparently somebody else had Ken Mary on Facebook. But
oh, wow.
My Facebook, it's very obvious that it's me. There's drumming pictures all over the place and some studio stuff and video clips, and so they'll know that it's me. And I'm on Instagram as well. I don't really do Twitter just because I don't know. It just seems like an odd format to me. Like I'm limited to a certain amount of words, and I don't know. I just never really got into it. I am on it. I never use it. So if they want to really get in touch with me, I'd say probably Instagram or Facebook would be the best way to do that.
Awesome, perfect. And please let me know when those releases come out so that I can share a link to everybody with those. And I can't wait to see them and hear it. It just sounds exciting. Thank you again.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.
And hopefully we talk again soon.
You got it, Ken. Stay safe.
All right, take care.
I'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you guys for being here again today. And remember to check out the Little Drummer Girl for more live interviews with musicians, artists, and entrepreneurs at lildrummergirl.com. We'll see you soon.